Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you today about something real, something a lot of people deal with but don't always have the words for. I'm talking about narcissistic behavior. Now listen to me carefully. This is not about hate, revenge, or lowering yourself. This is about strength, wisdom, and protecting your peace. Because the truth is, a narcissist's ego is not as strong as it looks. It's fragile. And the moment you understand that, the game changes. Ladies and gentlemen, let me slow this thing down and talk to you heart to heart, because this first point right here might change your life if you really understand it. The strongest power you will ever have over a narcissist is not revenge, not payback, not proving a point, and not trying to expose them. The strongest power you have is self-respect. And see, a lot of people miss this because self-respect is quiet, it doesn't announce itself, it doesn't threaten, it doesn't argue. It simply decides, I will not accept this anymore. And when you reach that place, something shifts that a narcissist cannot control. You see, a narcissist expects you to fight for validation. They expect you to beg to be understood. They expect you to explain yourself over and over again, hoping one day they'll finally get it. But the truth is they already get it. They just don't care. And the moment you realize that, you stop wasting your energy trying to convince someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. Self-respect is when you stop auditioning for basic decency. It's when you stop proving your value to someone who profits from making you doubt it. Now listen to me carefully. Revenge feels powerful for a moment, but it keeps you emotionally tied to the very person you're trying to escape. When you're plotting payback, when you're rehearsing arguments in your head, when you're waiting for the perfect moment to show them they were wrong, you're still giving them space in your mind. And a narcissist doesn't care if they live in your head as a villain or a hero, as long as they live there. Self-respect evicts them completely. A narcissist's ego is built on superiority. They need to feel above you, smarter than you, more desirable than you, more important than you. And the way they maintain that illusion is by pulling you into emotional reactions. When you cry, they feel powerful. When you yell, they feel important. When you explain yourself endlessly, they feel in control. But when you stand firm, calm, and unmoved, when you say less instead of more, when you walk away without drama, their ego starts cracking because they can't dominate someone who respects themselves. Self-respect also means you stop negotiating your boundaries. You don't say, please don't treat me this way. You say, I don't accept this, and then you act accordingly. That's the part most people skip. They talk boundaries, but they don't enforce them. A narcissist studies what you tolerate, not what you say. The moment you enforce a boundary without anger, without insults, without long explanations, you disrupt their entire strategy because they're used to people folding eventually. They're used to wearing people down. But self-respect doesn't wear down. It stands still. Let me tell you something important. You don't need a narcissist to admit they hurt you in order for your pain to be valid. Waiting for their accountability is like waiting for rain in a drought. Self-respect is choosing closure even when no apology comes. It's choosing peace even when they refuse to change. And when you do that, you remove their biggest weapon, your hope that they'll be different someday. See, revenge tries to make them feel pain. Self-respect makes them feel irrelevant. And irrelevance is the one thing a narcissistic ego cannot tolerate. They want to be the center of your emotional universe. They want your mood to rise and fall based on their behavior. But when your self-respect is solid, their behavior no longer controls your emotional weather. You don't get high from their praise. You don't crash from their criticism. You stay grounded. And that balance unsettles them. Self-respect also changes how you see yourself. Instead of asking, why wasn't I enough? You start asking, why did I accept less than I deserve? That shift is powerful because now the focus is no longer on fixing them, it's on honoring you. And when you honor yourself, you naturally withdraw from disrespect, manipulation, and emotional chaos. Not angrily, not dramatically, just firmly. Let me say this clearly because a lot of people confuse this. Self-respect is not arrogance. It's not coldness. It's not cruelty. It's clarity. It's knowing who you are and refusing to shrink to make someone else feel bigger. And narcissists depend on your willingness to shrink. They depend on your silence when you're hurt and you're over-explaining when you're done wrong. When that stops, they lose their footing. And here's the part that really shakes them. When you respect yourself, you stop trying to win. You stop trying to be right. You stop trying to be chosen. You choose yourself. And when you do that, you no longer need their approval, attention, or validation. That's when the power dynamic flips because they can't manipulate someone who doesn't need anything from them. Ladies and gentlemen, I've seen this over and over again. The moment you stand in your self-respect, calmly and consistently, the narcissist either escalates or disappears. Not because you attacked them, but because they can no longer control you. And control is the oxygen their ego breathes. Take that away, and the illusion collapses on its own. That's why I'm telling you today, in the spirit and wisdom people often hear from Steve Harvey, the goal is not to destroy someone else. The goal is to rebuild yourself so strongly that their ego has nothing left to feed on. When you respect yourself, you don't need revenge. Your peace becomes the proof. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something that took me a long time to learn in life. And once I learned it, it changed the way I deal with people forever. Silence and boundaries will do more damage to a narcissist's ego than any insult you could ever throw at them. See, most people think power is loud. They think power is yelling, confronting, explaining, proving, exposing, but real power is quiet. Real power is when you don't say what you could say because you finally understand what's not worth saying anymore. A narcissist thrives on reaction. That's their lifeline. They poke, provoke, manipulate, criticize, and dismiss just to see if they can still move you emotionally. Your anger feeds them. Your tears feed them. Your long messages explaining how they hurt you feed them. Even your disappointment feeds them. Silence, however, starves them. When you stop reacting, they feel it immediately. Not on the surface, but deep down where their insecurity lives. Now, let me be clear. Silence is not weakness. Silence is restraint. Silence is when you know exactly how to respond but choose peace instead. A narcissist expects you to defend yourself. They expect you to chase clarity. They expect you to argue your reality into their ears. And when you don't, it unsettles them because now they're left alone with their own thoughts, and that's the one place they hate to be. Boundaries work the same way. A boundary is not something you announce with a speech. A boundary is a behavior change. It's when you stop answering certain calls. It's when you stop engaging in circular conversations. It's when you stop giving access to your time, your energy, and your emotions. A narcissist doesn't respect words. They respect consequences. And when your behavior changes, they feel the loss of control. Let me tell you what really happens when you combine silence with boundaries. The narcissist starts testing you. They'll push harder. They'll send emotional messages. They'll play the victim. They'll act confused. They might even become nicer for a moment. That's not growth. That's panic. They are trying to figure out how to get their power back. And the moment you break your silence to explain yourself again, they know they still have access. Silence forces them to reveal themselves. When you stop responding, they start talking more. When you stop reacting, they start escalating. That's when you see the truth clearly. Not because they told it to you, but because their behavior exposed it. Boundaries remove the mask. They show you who someone is when they can't control you anymore. Here's another thing people don't understand. You don't owe anyone access to you. Just because someone has known you for years doesn't mean they get unlimited entry to your life. Just because someone is family doesn't mean they get to disrespect you. Just because you love someone doesn't mean they get to drain you. Boundaries are how you teach people how to treat you without saying a word. A narcissist feels superior when they can cross your boundaries without consequences. They feel powerful when you complain but stay. They feel validated when you forgive repeatedly with no change. But the moment you enforce a boundary and stay consistent, their ego takes a hit because now they're dealing with someone they can't dominate emotionally. Silence also protects your dignity. When you argue with a narcissist, they twist your words. They rewrite history. They provoke you until you say something emotional, then use that against you. Silence removes that weapon. When you don't explain, they have nothing to twist. When you don't react, they have nothing to use. You stay clean. You stay grounded. Let me say this part slowly. You don't need to be understood by someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. Silence is accepting that truth. It's choosing clarity over chaos. It's realizing that some conversations are designed to drain you, not resolve anything. And once you accept that, you stop trying to win arguments that were never meant to be fair. Boundaries also change how you see yourself. When you start enforcing them, you realize how strong you actually are. You realize you don't fall apart when someone is upset with you. You realize you don't need constant approval to feel okay. That inner strength is something a narcissist cannot fake. And when they see it in you, it reminds them of what they lack. Now, here's the part that really shakes their ego. When you stay silent and keep your boundaries, they lose their audience. Narcissists perform. They need reactions the way performers need applause. And when the room goes quiet, the performance feels pointless. That's when their confidence starts cracking, because it was never real confidence to begin with. It was dependence on external validation. Silence also gives you time to heal. Instead of spending your energy responding, explaining, and defending, you start investing that energy back into yourself. Your sleep improves, your focus improves, your peace returns. And when you start thriving without them, that hits harder than any insult ever could. Ladies and gentlemen, people often ask why narcissists hate silence so much. It's because silence reminds them that they are not in control. And control is everything to an ego that's built on insecurity. When you take that away calmly, consistently, and without drama, you don't just protect yourself, you quietly dismantle the illusion they live in. That's why the wisdom people often hear echoed in the words and life lessons of Steve Harvey always comes back to this. Protect your peace. Silence and boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are filters that keep your life clean. And once you master that, no narcissist can ever dominate your spirit again. Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you about something that doesn't look awful at first glance, but trust me, it shakes a narcissist to their core. Your growth, your progress, your elevation. See, a narcissist can handle arguments, drama, tears, and even temporary distance. What they cannot handle is watching you become better without them, because your growth exposes everything they pretend not to see about themselves. A narcissist needs you stuck. They need you confused, doubting yourself, replaying old conversations, wondering what you did wrong. As long as you're stuck, they feel ahead. As long as you're hurting, they feel superior. But the moment you start healing, learning, and moving forward, the balance shifts. And when that balance shifts, their ego starts trembling. Let me explain this clearly. Growth is not loud. Growth doesn't announce itself. Growth shows up in how you respond instead of react. It shows up in how you walk away instead of chase. It shows up in how you invest in yourself instead of trying to fix someone else. And when a narcissist sees that, they don't feel inspired. They feel threatened because your evolution reminds them of their stagnation. Narcissists don't like mirrors. They like spotlights. They want admiration, not reflection. But when you grow, you become a living mirror. You don't say a word, yet your peace highlights their chaos. Your emotional maturity highlights their manipulation. Your discipline highlights their excuses. And that comparison eats at their ego quietly but relentlessly. You see, a narcissist builds their identity on being ahead of others. Smarter, stronger, more successful, more desirable. But when you start improving your life mentally, emotionally, spiritually, they lose that imaginary advantage. They can no longer look down on you. And that is deeply uncomfortable for someone whose ego depends on hierarchy. Here's another truth people don't talk about. Narcissists rarely grow because growth requires accountability. It requires humility. It requires the ability to say, I was wrong. And those words feel like death to an inflated ego. So instead of evolving, they repeat patterns, same arguments, same manipulation, same blame, same excuses. And when they see you breaking cycles they're still trapped in, it unsettles them. Your growth also removes their narrative. When you're hurting, they can say you're weak. When you're angry, They can say you're unstable. When you're emotional, they can say you're the problem. But when you're calm, focused, and moving forward, their story collapses. They can no longer paint themselves as superior or justified. And nothing frustrates a narcissist more than losing control of the story. Let me tell you something important. Growth doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you never feel pain again. It means you stop living in it. It means you learn faster. You recover quicker. You choose yourself sooner. And every time you do that, you take another brick out of the false pedestal they built for themselves. A narcissist also hates growth because it makes you less predictable. When you were desperate for validation, they knew exactly how to manipulate you. When you were afraid of losing them, they controlled your behavior. But when you grow, your priorities change. You stop tolerating confusion. You stop accepting crumbs. You stop negotiating your worth. And now they don't know how to handle you. Growth also attracts new environments, new people, and new opportunities. And that's dangerous to a narcissist's ego because they want to believe you need them to survive. When they see you surrounded by support, respect, and positivity, it destroys that illusion. They realize they were not your source. They were your obstacle. And let me say this slowly. When you grow, you don't chase closure. You don't chase explanations. You don't chase apologies. You understand that some people were lessons, not destinations. That level of emotional maturity feels like rejection to a narcissist, even if you never rejected them out loud. Because emotionally, you moved on, and they can feel it. Your growth also changes how you carry yourself. You speak with clarity. You listen with discernment. You respond with intention. And narcissists depend on emotional chaos to stay in control. When you bring order into your life, their tactics stop working. Gaslighting fails when you trust your perception. Manipulation fails when you trust your intuition. And your confidence becomes untouchable. Here's the part that really hits their ego. You become uninterested, not bitter, not angry, just uninterested. Their words don't hook you anymore. Their moods don't control you anymore. Their presence doesn't excite or intimidate you anymore. And indifference is something a narcissist cannot compete with. Because indifference says, you no longer matter enough to affect me. Growth also teaches you discernment. You stop oversharing. You stop explaining your plans. You stop giving access to people who haven't earned it. And when a narcissist realizes they no longer have front row access to your life, they feel replaced, not by another person, but by your self-respect. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why your growth is not just personal, it's powerful. You don't need to confront a narcissist to shake their ego. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to say a word. You simply become better. Better boundaries, better habits, better mindset, better standards. And every step forward you take silently reminds them of what they refuse to do. That's why the message so many people connect to when they hear wisdom shared in the tone and life experience of Steve Harvey always comes back to this idea. Success and grace. Ours are the best responses to disrespect. When you rise, when you heal, when you elevate without bitterness, you don't just free yourself, you expose the fragility of an ego that depended on your brokenness. Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you about the kind of strength that doesn't look impressive to the outside world, but completely dismantles a narcissist from the inside. Emotional control. See, a narcissist believes they can control you by controlling how you feel. They study your triggers. They learn what makes you angry, what makes you cry, what makes you doubt yourself. And once they figure that out, they push those buttons whenever they need to feel powerful. But the moment you master your emotions, their entire system collapses. A narcissist expects emotional chaos. They expect explosions, breakdowns, long emotional speeches, and desperate attempts to be understood. That's how they measure their importance. If they can make you lose control, they feel in control. But when you stay calm, when your tone stays steady, when your reactions don't match their provocation, it confuses them deeply, because now they're dealing with someone they can't manipulate emotionally. Emotional control doesn't mean you don't feel. It means your feelings no longer control your behavior. You still feel hurt, disappointment, anger, but you don't hand those emotions over to someone who will use them against you. You process privately instead of performing publicly. And that shift alone takes away one of a narcissist's greatest weapons. Let me tell you something real. Narcissists poke on purpose. They say things they know will sting. They bring up old wounds. They minimize your pain. They twist facts. And they do it to get a reaction. The reaction is the reward. When you finally understand that, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding strategically, or not responding at all. And nothing frustrates a narcissist more than failed manipulation. When you control your emotions, arguments stop being dramatic. Conversations stop being explosive. You don't defend yourself against false accusations. You don't chase clarity. You don't over-explain your intentions. You simply state your truth once, calmly, and then disengage. And when you do that, the narcissist feels exposed, because without your emotional response, their tactics look empty and obvious. Here's another thing. Emotional control removes their ability to rewrite your reality. Gaslighting only works when you doubt yourself. When you stay emotionally grounded, you trust what you saw, what you heard, and what you felt. You don't second guess your memory just because someone denies it. And when a narcissist realizes they can no longer shake your confidence in your own perception, they lose control. A narcissist also relies on escalation. They want things to go from calm to chaotic, because chaos gives them cover. When voices are raised and emotions are high, accountability disappears. But when you stay calm, facts stand out, patterns become obvious, and suddenly their behavior doesn't look powerful, it looks desperate. Emotional control shines a light where they prefer darkness. Let me say this clearly. You don't need to match someone's energy to be strong. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to explode to be taken seriously. When you remain composed, you communicate something powerful without saying it. You don't control me. And to a narcissist, that message is devastating. Emotional control also changes how you exit situations. Instead of storming out, you walk away with clarity. Instead of blocking in anger, you disconnect in peace. Instead of reacting impulsively, you move intentionally. And when a narcissist sees you detach without bitterness, it unsettles them because they expect chaos at the end. They expect drama. Calm endings deny them that final sense of power. Another thing emotional control does is protect your dignity. Narcissists want you to say things you'll regret. They want screenshots. They want proof that you're emotional or unstable. When you stay composed, you give them nothing, no ammunition, no leverage, no story to tell. You exit clean, and that eats at their ego because they can't paint themselves as the victim anymore. Emotional control also teaches patience. You stop responding immediately. You pause, you think, and that pause changes everything. A narcissist depends on impulsive reactions. When you pause, you disrupt their rhythm. They don't know what's coming next. And unpredictability in you feels like loss of control to them. Let me tell you something powerful. When you master your emotions, you stop needing validation from people who withhold it. You stop needing approval from people who criticize you. You stop needing reassurance from people who destabilize you. And the moment you stop needing something from a narcissist, their ego takes a direct hit because they no longer have leverage. Emotional control also allows you to choose peace over proving a point. You realize that being right doesn't always mean being at peace. And once peace becomes your priority, you stop engaging in emotional traps. Narcissists lay traps with words, tone, and timing. Emotional control allows you to step over them instead of falling in. Here's the truth most people don't realize. Narcissists are not emotionally strong. They are emotionally dependent on validation, dependent on control. When you regulate your emotions, you expose that dependence. Your calm becomes a mirror reflecting their instability. And this is why so many people resonate with the life lessons often shared in the voice and experience of Steve Harvey. Real power is self-mastery. When you control your emotions, no one can push your buttons without your permission. And when a narcissist realizes they no longer have access to your emotional world, their ego has nothing left to stand on.